At that Sunday dinner, Harper lifted her wine glass and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "How does it feel to be basically useless?" Ethan chuckled. Even my grandson looked down, pretending not to see me flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her I wouldn't pay another bill. The laughter died instantly. They had no idea I'd been keeping every receipt, every transfer, every signature. They hoped I'd forgotten. But what they didn't know was, before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Stories like this don't just happen in movies. They unfold at real dinner tables, behind polite smiles, in moments no one else notices. If you've felt it, stay with me. I learned early what it meant to be the forgettable one. My childhood memories aren't warm or nostalgic, they're sharp around the edges. I remember sitting at our crowded kitchen table while my mother leaned past me to pile extra mashed potatoes onto my sister's plate. The steam drifted toward her, not me. She didn't even notice my plate was half empty. I told myself it didn't matter. I swallowed it, the way kids do. I didn't know then how familiar that feeling would become. In fourth grade, I won a county math contest. They called my name over the squeaky gym speakers, the metal still warm against my neck. I scanned the bleachers, hoping to see my father. Instead, he was across town at my sister's recital, tying ribbons on her costume. He framed her picture that night. My medal disappeared into a drawer. A quiet lesson: keep your wins small, so no one feels bothered. I didn't know it then, but I'd lived by that rule far too long. By 17, I worked nights at a flickering diner off Route 17. The neon buzzed like it was dying, and I'd go home reeking of burnt bacon and cheap coffee. Every paycheck went into the family jar on top of the fridge. I thought I was helping us survive. Months later, I found out my parents used that money to send my sister on a spring break trip. When I confronted my mother, she just sighed. "You'll understand someday." I didn't. I swallowed it again. Another bruise forming where no one could see. I didn't know it then, but that bruise would shape every sacrifice I'd make. Numbers became my escape. Numbers were fair, predictable. They didn't play favorites. So I became an accountant, someone who could bring order to chaos. My first office smelled like toner and stale coffee, and the fluorescent lights hummed above me like a lullaby. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I liked steady. I met Ethan's father during tax season. He had a warm laugh that made me believe life didn't have to feel so heavy. But warmth doesn't always last. When Ethan was 2, his father left during a storm so loud it rattled the windows. I stood at the doorway holding my son, watching taillights blur in the snow until they vanished. I didn't cry. I just held Ethan tighter, his tiny heartbeat tapping against my ribs. I didn't know it then, but that night turned me into the person I'd be for decades, the one who kept everything from falling apart, no matter the cost. Ethan grew up at our kitchen table, leaning against me while I balanced bills. He'd ask what every number meant, his small voice soft in the lamplight. He once told me, "When I'm older, I'll take care of you." I believed him. That belief kept me moving through years of overtime, scraped together savings, and quiet resilience. So the day he brought Harper home polished, confident, wearing a coat more expensive than my monthly rent, I tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. She hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle her sleeves, and said, "So nice to finally meet you, Maggie." Her perfume filled the hallway, floral and sharp. I didn't know it then, but that scent would follow every lie she'd ever tell me. The first time Harper asked for money, she made it sound like I'd be rude to refuse. We were sitting in my living room on a quiet afternoon, sunlight striping the floor through half-open blinds. She crossed her legs. That smooth, practiced motion of someone used to being accommodated. and said, "The boutique's just having a little cash flow dip. Totally normal. You understand business better than anyone." Ethan nodded beside her, eyes fixed on the carpet. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the same one from childhood dinners and forgotten medals. I wrote the check. I told myself it was temporary. I didn't know then it was the start of something I wouldn't recognize until it had already swallowed years of my life. After that, the requests came dressed as opportunities. Harper talked about branding, expansion, collaborations, using words like legacy as if she were offering me a seat at a table I was only ever meant to fund. At Christmas, she handed out lavish gifts: a smartwatch for Ethan, a drone for Noah, while giving me a lavender candle worth maybe $10. She smiled like it was meaningful. I pretended not to notice. But deep down, something small cracked. I didn't know it then. But imbalance becomes invisible when you're the only one expected to carry the weight. I kept saving for the cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. My little dream. A quiet porch. A rocking chair. Morning light through pine trees. I'd look at the photo tucked in my planner every Sunday, reminding myself that some things were still mine. Then one night, Harper called, her voice breathless but polished, the kind of panic that expected rescue. The boutique's rent doubled. Inventories behind. A supplier's threatening legal action. Ethan came on the line next. "Mom, we're drowning." I agreed to meet them. I didn't know then that decision would cost me every piece of that Blue Ridge dream. The diner was the same kind I'd worked in as a teenager: flickering neon, cracked vinyl, coffee that tasted like burnt air. Harper sat across from me, mascara smudged, hair pulled back, still radiating the quiet confidence of someone who assumed everything would be handled for her. I slid the contract across the table. A safeguard. $60,000 of my retirement in exchange for 52% ownership of her boutique. She didn't read it. She signed with a careless flourish, a signature that would later save me and destroy her narrative. When I got home, I placed the contract in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. The metal groaned when I shut it, as if warning me the weight of that moment would return someday. I didn't know it then, but that drawer held the beginning of my freedom. The years that followed blurred together: transfers, emergencies, quick favors, and long apologetic hugs that never addressed the real debt. My savings thinned, my dreams shrank, and Harper's confidence grew, towering on a foundation she pretended she'd built alone. Then one afternoon, it all shifted. I overheard Harper at her boutique, laughing with a customer. "I built this from nothing. No investors, no help." Her voice was bright, proud, rehearsed. My stomach dropped. Not because she lied, I had grown used to that, but because she said it so easily, like the truth had never included me at all. I walked out of the store with the coffee I'd brought her still warm in my hand. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that lie would echo all the way to the day I finally said no. It always starts with something small, small enough that you convince yourself you're imagining it. The first escalation came on a humid Thursday. The air felt thick, the kind that clings to your skin. My phone buzzed, a voice message from Harper. Sugary sweet. "Hey Maggie. Weird thing. The boutique's credit card got hit with a random charge. Not my fault. Could you cover it until we sort it out?" She laughed at the end, a soft, practiced laugh meant to make the request feel harmless. I covered it. When I hit confirm, a tightness twisted beneath my ribs, a pressure I didn't have a name for yet. I didn't know it then, but every small ask was a breadcrumb leading to something far bigger. A week later, Ethan appeared at my door at sunset, Noah's backpack dangling from his tired arm. The sky behind him glowed orange, stretching his shadow across my porch. "Mom, school deposits due today. We're short. Can you help just this once?" He always said just this once, and I always said yes. He hugged me too hard, like he wanted to bury his guilt somewhere between my shoulders. When he left, the house felt heavier than it had all week. I stood there in the doorway long after his car pulled away, the silence pressing into my bones. I swallowed it, but the bruise stayed. After that, the requests grew teeth. Harper needed new furniture for the boutique rebrand. Her influencer friend's party required expensive decor so she wouldn't look cheap. Noah needed fees for soccer, robotics, a field trip. Every ask came wrapped in a compliment. You're the only one we can rely on. Maggie, you're so stable. As if my stability existed solely to cushion their chaos. I didn't complain. I should have. Instead, I watched the Blue Ridge cabin in my planner become just ink on paper, a quiet dream shrinking in the rearview mirror. One night, cicadas screamed outside my kitchen window, their sound rising and falling like a warning siren. I sat at my table, surrounded by bank statements, the printed pages still warm from the machine. When I spread them across the table, the numbers hit me like a punch. Thousands, tens of thousands, a mosaic of financial bleeding I had ignored for far too long. Then I saw it as signature on an old authorization form. My signature. Except, it wasn't. The slant was wrong. The looped L was too low. Ethan had forged it years ago. Not for something huge, just a small authorization, but betrayal doesn't need to be big to break something inside you. I traced the fake signature with my fingertip, feeling that old childhood bruise flare to life. I didn't confront him. I just sat there, with the heat buzzing outside, realizing there were parts of my son I hadn't wanted to see. I didn't know it then, but that forged line rewrote the story I'd been telling myself about us. A month later, another wound. I stopped by the boutique with a coffee for Harper, thinking a small kindness might thaw the tension building between us. Inside, the air smelled like eucalyptus candles and ambition. Harper was chatting with a customer, a woman draped in diamonds. Harper flipped her hair, perfectly timed to make the bracelets sparkle. I built this place from nothing, she said. No help, no investors, just hard work. The customer nodded, impressed. I froze. Built from nothing. The coffee in my hand cooled instantly, like the warmth had been sucked out of the room. I slipped out quietly before Harper could see me. The bell over the door chimed a tiny metallic betrayal. I didn't know it then, but that sentence would echo in my chest until the night everything snapped. Thanksgiving came next, loud, cluttered, smelling of roasted turkey and burnt marshmallows. Harper floated around in a cranberry sweater, making sure everyone saw how effortlessly she hosted. During dinner, she lifted her glass. Maggie is honestly a lifesaver. I swear we'd fall apart without her. The table laughed. A soft, polite laugh. The kind that says she serves a purpose. Nothing more. My smile held, but a cold burn slid down my throat with every sip of water. I didn't know it then, but they weren't praising me. They were reminding me of my role. The night everything tipped wasn't dramatic at first. Sunday dinner had been the usual performance, Harper smiling too wide, Ethan chewing too fast, Noah absorbed in his phone. But as soon as the plates were cleared, Harper gave me a look I'd learned to fear. A practiced smile with sharp edges. "Can we talk in the kitchen?" she asked. Her tone wasn't a question. Inside, the air smelled like roasted garlic and lemon dish soap. She closed the door behind us with a soft click, the kind that made the room feel smaller. "There's an opportunity to expand," she began, twirling her empty wine glass like it was part of a script. The space next door opened up. With a little renovation, we could double our inventory. We just need a cosigner. 75,000. A formality. You know how this works. Ethan stood by the fridge, pretending to dry a plate already spotless. His silence was permission. My heart didn't drop. It hardened. I'm not co-signing. I said, simple, quiet, final, the kind of answer a lifetime of swallowed pain finally produces. Harper blinked, stunned not by my refusal, but by the fact I dared to make one. Then her voice sharpened. Why not? You're not exactly struggling. What do you even do all day? Her words sliced cleaner than any shout. Even Ethan winced. He set the plate down, but his feet stayed rooted. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. I didn't stay to hear anything else. I walked out. The sound of my footsteps, strangely steady. I didn't know it then. But that single refusal was the moment they decided to punish me for stepping off the script. The silence that followed over the next 3 days was calculated. No texts. No requests. No pretend affection. Just a cold, deliberate distance. Then, on the fourth afternoon, the doorbell rang sharp. Repeated presses that rattled the frame. Harper didn't wait for me to invite her in. She marched into my living room, coat still on, boots hitting the floor in angry staccato. Ethan followed, looking like he wanted to sink into the walls. We need to talk, she snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just walked to the drawer and lifted the thick folder, my decade of quiet sacrifice. I handed it to Ethan. He opened it slowly. Transfer receipts, tuition payments, boutique loans, tax penalties I'd covered, the contract from 2017. I watched his face shift: confusion, then dread, then something that looked like shame. Harper scoffed. Oh, come on, Maggie. This is exaggerated. Ancient history. Ethan's voice cracked. Harper, these numbers are real. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. You're using this to control us. No, I said. I'm using it to stop being erased. My voice didn't shake. Theirs did. They left without another word. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, a thick legal envelope lay shoved halfway through my mail slot. I didn't even need to open it to know what it was. Inside, accusations. Pages of them. Coercion. Manipulation. Undue influence. A demand that I return my ownership. A demand that I step aside quietly. A demand that I pretend none of it ever happened. The betrayal hit so fast it left no time for anger. Only clarity. A sharp, cold kind. I called Dana that evening. She didn't gasp. She didn't panic. She simply said, I know someone. That someone was Olivia Chen. When she arrived the next morning, she didn't bother with small talk. She spread every document across my dining table, scanning each page with the precision of a surgeon. When she got to the 2017 contract, she tapped it once. This alone undoes everything they're claiming. 6 words. 6 words that steadied the ground beneath me. Meanwhile, Harper's world was starting to split in the places she thought were cemented. A former boutique employee stopped by the financial clinic where I volunteered, complaining loudly about being fired without warning. Harper keeps saying she built the place from scratch, she said, rolling her eyes. No help. Total self-made queen. I felt my pulse thud once slow and deep. The lie wasn't new, but hearing it echoed by strangers stripped away the final layer of illusion. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the last time I ever felt afraid of them. The next step wasn't rage. It was clarity. And clarity, I would learn, is a powerful beginning. The morning of the hearing felt unnaturally still, as if the air itself was bracing for impact. The sky was washed out gray, the kind that erases shadows. Olivia walked beside me up the courthouse steps, her calm presence cutting through the tightness in my chest. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a cold, flat glow. My fingers tightened around the folder of documents, the quiet history of everything they thought I'd forgotten. Harper was already seated when we entered. She wore a tailored black blazer, her posture stiff, her expression practiced, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. Ethan sat beside her, shoulders caved inward, his hands locked together like he was holding himself upright. He didn't look at me, not once. I took my seat. The wooden bench was cold, grounding. Around us, the courtroom shifted into a hush, the rustle of papers, the scrape of a chair leg, a cough from the back. When the judge entered, even the air seemed to straighten. Harper's attorney started first. He launched into a speech dripping with theatrics, waving papers like props. Your Honor, my client was under emotional distress. She was manipulated into signing a document she did not understand. I watched Harper dab her eyes with a tissue that stayed perfectly dry. He painted me as a calculating woman, orchestrating financial traps, leveraging desperation. It was almost impressive, the way he twisted my decades of sacrifice into something sinister. Then it was Olivia's turn. She didn't rush. She smoothed the edges of her papers, letting silence settle until the room leaned toward her. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. Your Honor, what we have here is not manipulation. It's documentation. She presented the evidence one piece at a time, the timestamp transfers, the emails from landlords thanking me for saving the boutique, the tax statements proving I withdrew retirement savings for them, and finally, the contract from 2017, the one Harper signed in a diner without reading, the signature that looked rushed, sloppy hers. Olivia placed it before the judge like a nail sealing a coffin. The judge studied it, adjusting her glasses. The room held its breath. Mrs. Reed Lawson, she said, her tone neutral but cutting. Did you sign this? Harper swallowed. I don't remember. It was years ago. I was overwhelmed. She reached for Ethan's hand. He didn't take it. This signature, the judge continued, tapping the page, matches your driver's license and multiple documents filed before and after the date in question. Harper looked suddenly small in her expensive blazer. The evidence presented is unshakable. Motion to dismiss is granted. The gavel cracked through the room sharp. Final. Harper flinched. Ethan's shoulders collapsed inward, as if the truth had finally crushed him. For a moment, everything around me went strangely quiet, like sound itself had stepped back to let me breathe. I rose slowly, not triumphant, not bitter, just steady, steady in a way I hadn't felt in years. As I walked past Harper, she kept her eyes fixed on the table, but when I reached the aisle, I felt it, the sharp, shaky inhale of someone watching the version of reality they'd built crumble in real time. Outside, the cold air hit my face, clean and bright. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their weight. They were carrying mine. After the hearing, the world around me seemed quieter, not peaceful, but cleared out, like a room after a storm where everything loose has finally blown away. For the first time in years, my phone didn't vibrate with emergencies disguised as affection. No surprise bills, no urgent favors, just silence. Unexpectedly, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt weightless. I opened the curtains each morning and let the cold sunlight spill across the floor. I brewed coffee without calculating what I'd need to cover next. I painted again, rough strokes at first, then softer ones. Colors I hadn't touched in decades found their way onto the canvas. Freedom wasn't loud. It was steady. It was mine. But Ethan and Harper's silence wasn't calm. It was cracking underneath. Word spread quickly in our town. The boutique had shrunk, the shelves thinning, 2 employees laid off, suppliers demanding cash up front. Harper posted glossy Instagram photos, pretending it was a minimalist rebrand. But anyone who'd ever seen fear wrapped in confidence recognized the truth. I didn't feel joy watching her struggle, but I didn't feel guilty either. That was new. One afternoon, while trimming the rosemary bush along my garden path, I noticed a small figure at the gate. Noah stood there, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, something cupped in his hands. "Dad says you're mad at us," he murmured. I'm not." He opened his hands. Inside was the little wooden bird I carved him years ago. When thunderstorms kept him awake at night, he'd kept it all this time. Somehow, that tiny truth pierced deeper than any apology his parents could offer. I knelt, brushed dirt from my fingers, and took it gently. "I'm not mad at you, sweetheart." His shoulders eased. He didn't stay long. But after he left, I realized the tightness in my chest had finally loosened. Not healed, just loosened. That evening, I returned to the drawer where the folder lived. The metal groaned less this time, as though even it understood something had shifted. I ran my hand along the edges of the documents, every transfer, every statement, every signature Harper hoped I'd forgotten. They weren't just records anymore. They were leverage. A quiet power I never asked for but finally understood how to hold. People think revenge is loud, dramatic, violent. But real revenge is when the truth becomes a pressure no one can escape, least of all the ones who created it. They thought taking me to court would scare me. They thought losing would silence me. What they didn't realize was this: they had just placed the one weapon I needed right back into my hands. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while they pretended not to notice, hit subscribe. Stories like this don't just happen in courtrooms, they happen in kitchens, over dinner tables, in the quiet moments no one else sees. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you're not alone. Stay with me. This story isn't over.